That's certainly an option. The conditional use permit process is not a cheap process. It's a public hearing process. There are 4 basic criteria. It needs to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and zoning. It's got to look, consider neighborhood and surrounding land uses. We felt that at this point the 10,000 square foot, as I've seen in the interim, will be appropriate, but I think the conditional use permit will be definitely something staff will work with, look with the planning commission to determine whether that has any place in this process. So because that's a process that we have in our codes. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any questions?
Not yet. All right, well, I would like to make a motion to repeal ordinance 909. And I'd like to make a concurrent motion to adopt the ordinance enacting interim controls with regard to size limits in rural zones.
For discussion purposes, I'll second. I do have one request, though. And that request is we're a body of 3, and a third of our membership is missing, and a number of issues surrounding to the west end. So personally, I'd rather wait until Commissioner Peach can join us and listen to the tape. We can leave the original ordinance in place for a week, let him come back, review the tape, and I'd like to just make sure he's comfortable with, I'm inclined to support where we're headed, but I think that in all fairness, this is a pretty big issue that he will be inheriting, and you guys will be finishing this up in the new year, most likely. I probably won't be here to see its conclusion, so I hate to move forward without his support for a week. I think he'll be here next week. So I would, and
Commissioner Zias will be gone next week, so we might want to talk 2 weeks.
We also had a couple of issues with the prosecutor, questions about we've not gotten the prosecutor's advice along the way. I don't necessarily agree with those comments early on, but it would give time for the prosecutor one last time to give us their best advice on how to move forward. I think the emergency ordinance is still in effect for another couple of weeks, so there's no gap per se. We'll never have it done perfectly, but in this case, because we're only 3 of us, and I'm not sure where Bill stands on this issue, honestly. He didn't say anything before he left. So, it has nothing to do with we have an emergency ordinance in place, so we're not leaving a gap that people can come in but in this case, because so much of this does affect the West End, I just wonder if he'd have some different viewpoints on some of the, especially with regards to the Oak-Hilly area. I'm sure he may have some thoughts on that, but those are just my thoughts. I can
well, I would certainly like Commissioner Peach to be able to weigh in. Will there be any gap in any gap if we were to postpone a vote on this repeal and interim ordinance for 2 weeks?
The emergency is still good until September 26th, most likely.
Well, the emergency ordinance was adopted on July 26th, and it expires automatically on the 61st day. And I think my calculations would indicate the 60th day would be the 23rd of September. I got my math right here. In terms of gaps in by the county home rule charter, any ordinance that you adopt as a board, it's effective 10 calendar days after the ordinance is adopted. So if you took action next Tuesday on either repeal and or the interim, and September 23rd is the deadline, then there would be no gaps because that would be 10 days later. If you go beyond next Tuesday, you're likely going to have a gap.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, I would be willing to postpone until next week, and I'll call in for a vote from where I am. And I do have a couple of comments and questions at this point, if that would be appropriate, Commissioner Chester. Just since this is my opportunity to address the audience and the folks who have come here to speak to this today, I want to thank you as always for making the time to come and share your opinions. I know it's not easy for many of you to come to meetings during the middle of the week, and I appreciate your being here. And for those who spoke out in opposition to the interim controls, you know, I particularly appreciate your concerns. I realize that you're in the minority in this room today, and I want you to know that I have taken those into consideration. In my mind, the purpose of this ordinance is to give our Department of Community Development and our Director of Community Development time to consider all of the elements that are necessary to properly define and ensure the characteristics and uses of residential zones, of rural zones, and whether we characterize that as a knee-jerk reaction to a specific proposal or not, in my mind, doesn't really matter. What's important is that we've got an opportunity to address our comprehensive plan, to address our zoning code, and to try and do some thinking about the future so that the code resembles, so that the code defines what we all want those zones to resemble. And I think 6 months is an adequate amount of time for public input, and it's also the amount of time that our elected official who is our head land use officer has asked for, and it's definitely my inclination to grant that. And I also would just like to say at this point, so with that, I do plan to vote in favor of my motion next Tuesday. I also would just like to ask Mr. Miller to consider all of the comments that he's heard from neighbors today. And in fact, we have received written correspondence, which will become part of the public record for this meeting, from dozens of residents, not just of the East Square Bay neighborhood, but folks from all across the county who are concerned at the size, scope, and scale of this particular project. So while the law as it exists will be used to, will be applied fairly to this potential project and to this proponent, I hope that it might make a difference to the proponent of this project to know that her neighbors, her entire neighborhood, and in fact dozens and dozens of folks from across the county are concerned at not at the type of business, not at the concept of a bed and breakfast, but at the size, scope, scale of this project and its relation to their neighborhood. Once something is built, it's there forever. And so I would just ask for that consideration. And that's all I've got for today.
So, Brian, I do have one question for the prosecuting attorney's office. And there has been some conversation that board members are personally liable with the current emergency ordinance. So I guess I wouldn't want to extend our personal liability any longer than necessary. So, on one hand, we could wait for Mr. Peach, but do we continue to expose ourselves under personal liability by leaving the emergency ordinance in place? And are we more protected by passing the ordinance? Because I certainly don't want to put the board in a vulnerable position with personal liability.
You know, that's a question I can take back. And I don't mean that as simply to punt. I'm not the author of the original advice. So the board has the prosecuting attorney's recommendation. I would just have to politely refer that to you. I can bring the specific question to the prosecutor's office, but what I can say is that if you do repeal the ordinance today, it won't take effect for 10 days. So there's still going to be a personal liability if that is or is not true. That's definitely available to people if they want to make that allegation for at least another period of 10 days. But as to what to do right now on that specific concern, I'll have to ask the chief or chief civil.
How about the new emergency ordinance? Would the board have personal liability under that ordinance?
That's something that I have not studied and I'm not prepared to advise.
I mean, we're in this tough spot. We'll give them advice. We have some personal liability, and we don't have an answer today as to which way is the best way to go with. So.
And all I can do, Commissioner, is ask for those that are providing advice on this subject to get back to you.
Did you ask? Did you check?
I don't know if it really helps, but when you talk about rescinding the ordinance, when we had that meeting and you talked about, and the commissioners talked about rescinding the ordinance, then it was almost like we had enough information to vest the permit. So the permit has been vested. So the secondary ordinance doesn't really have anything to do with this project. So I don't, just common sense.
Do you think you'll need the full 6 months? To go to conclusion? Think you'd use the full 6 months?
Yes.
Okay.
Should.
Do you think there's value in waiting for Commissioner Peach's input, or do you want to just move it forward?
I would like to move it forward. Commissioner Peach and I talked about it a couple of weeks ago, and he seemed okay with it. I mean, when we talked about it, it was probably a week and a half ago, so I don't know if you want to take that from me.
Yeah, I can add a little bit of something to that comment. Mr. Beach did talk to me after he had spoken with Mary Ellen, and I can confirm that he told her that he would not raise an objection to removing the interim or the emergency ordinance and installing a 6-month interim. But he also told me, and I shared with him, that I cannot tell you that this is what his vote would be, because then he didn't hear the public record. And so he agreed that he would listen very carefully to the public record. If the two of you weren't in lockstep, and that he would be prepared to vote on it if you asked for the delay in the following week, is what he told me.
Yeah, I think that I would be okay with voting on this today based on my understanding of Commissioner Peach's position, and if he has concerns with this, then I know that he and I will talk about it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to rescind emergency ordinance 909. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We have a motion and a second to enact proposed ordinance establishing interim official controls under Clallam County Code, Chapter 33.40. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Hopefully Commissioner Peach will understand.